Okay, cool. Does everyone have the starter project ready to rock? Good to go? Okay, let's jump right in. So first thing I'm gonna do is pull up Insomnia, and I'll post in the channel this base URL that we're gonna use. This base URL is just a URL. Let me put it in this code snippet here. This particular URL, why won't this let me do it? There we go. It goes to the random users API, and it gives us a result of 20 users. So really simple. If you see here on the sidebar, what's happening? You see here on the sidebar, when I look for those 20 users, it gives me a results array, and then it's a dictionary inside of it that has all of this information. So each person is a dictionary. I don't know how far down it goes. I think it's right here before the new person starts. Yeah. So this is all a dictionary of one singular person. And this array is of multiple people. So there is an array with lots of dictionaries inside, but you can think of it as just like, hey, we've got an array of people objects when we make them. So don't let that confuse you too much. Every person has a dictionary that has like a name, you know, where they live and their city and things like that. Tonight, we're just gonna worry about getting 1, their name, 2, email, 3, phone number, and 4, a profile picture. So that way you guys get some good exposure to all of those things, getting them out of JSON. We've used this API before, so it shouldn't be super difficult for you. But you will need this base URL. You can modify it to do however many people you want, with just that endpoint changing to a different number. I can even just get 1 if I want to. And the 1 will just pull up just 1 singular person. But I'm gonna go with 20 because I feel like that will give us a good amount and it looks pretty sharp. So I'm just using Insomnia to do this. Tomorrow, and we'll practice tonight of putting in the base URL that you'll use tomorrow, and you'll see kind of the results that come back. I mean, JSON is only as hard as you make it. If you can look at the JSON and just kind of make sense of these braces are meaning that there's an array of dictionaries that are people, you can make sense of that and just look in and see, hey, name is a string. It's actually a dictionary, but it's a dictionary of strings. You know, number here is an int. Just things like that. Just reason through beforehand, and it will save you a lot of time. Tomorrow, too, I would say what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go really slow. We're only going to parse 1 property at a time. So we're going to parse, I think we're actually going to skip doing the name first, because if you look here, this is a dictionary of strings. It's a little bit more complicated. So what I'm going to do instead is we're just going to get the person's email to start with, because it's really easy. It's just a key value of email that gives us a string of their email back. It'll be really easy to use. So we'll go ahead and start with that. Question, we can start at the tail end of the app from the detail view and build backwards, or we can start with the model and go forwards like we usually do. Do you guys prefer a certain way?
It doesn't matter to me, whichever way is more comfortable for you.
Okay, let's, I think because I did it earlier today with the detail view and went backwards. But I think today for you guys, since normally you start with a model and go from there after you set up the storyboard, let's go ahead and do that. But first things first, we do have these files that haven't been created yet. So I don't have a Cocoa Touch for the table view, and I don't have a Cocoa Touch for the detail view. So I've made you a file for those. So you can go ahead and click, I'm sorry, a folder. You can click on the view controller folder and then hit Command N. And then we'll just go ahead and make both of those. So Cocoa Touch. This one's going to be our URL table view controller. Make sure you put your prefix and then just something to be descriptive. I'm going to call it people table view controller because we're going to get several people inside of this. So I'm going to add that to our view controller file. And then click on the file folder again. Hit Command N. And then we'll make the detail view one. So this one's going to be a UI view controller. Let's call it person detail is what I'm going to call it. You guys can call it whatever you like, but person detail I feel like will be the most helpful. Cool. So now I've got a file for both of my views that I'm going to use. We won't really worry about going into them and doing anything quite yet. We just want to make sure that, you know, if we've classed our storyboard, let's not have to come back to it after everything's set up. Because in best case scenario, you set up your UI and wire it up, and then you don't have to come back to your storyboard to do any more logic or anything. So table view, we'll go ahead and class MB people table view controller. Same thing with the detail view. So MB person, make sure you type out that person. We don't want to misclass it here. Make sure it's the right class. And then your reuse identifier for your cell, I've already named for you. It's called person cell, just like we always do. We're going to do a basic cell because they're easy. We won't have to worry about doing a custom cell. And I don't believe tomorrow that you have to do a custom cell. I think you can just stick with a basic one tomorrow. Cool. You guys give me a thumbs up if you're to that point so far. You can do it visually or you can do it in the chat, either or.
I'm not sure why my class isn't popping up.
Mine isn't either.
So go to product and then do a clean build. And then after you build it, let's try it again.
Mine's still not popping up.
That's so weird.
I know. That is weird. I've never had that happen.
Yeah, normally that doesn't.
Alex, can you click on your view controllers, your files at all? Mine, I can't.
On your view. Oh, yeah. No. Well, I can click on them, but they're empty.
Mine are too.
That's so weird.
That happened to me too as well.
Go ahead and delete them, guys. And instead of putting them in the folder right away, let's just click on the actual project and then recreate them from there. You can delete what you've put inside these view controller files and then just remake them. And then after they're remade, you can probably drag them into the file folder and they should work. It's really strange that they didn't.
I know. I do that all the time, like make my files first.
I'm not going to do anything too crazy while you guys are doing that. I'm just going to clean up my files here with just taking out unnecessary code. So I promise I'm not adding anything. Whoops.
You're there now. At least.
Let me know if that worked for you guys.
It did for me.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's working for me now.
Okay. That's super curious that it was being weird about it.
I had to discard changes, so I'm like reopening it again.
Gotcha.
I think I've pretty much gotten used to the fact that if something's going to happen, it's going to happen to me on this Mac. I have had the weirdest things. I mean, like Hayden, I'll like message him and I'm like, I honestly like have Sunday night, I was working on my sprint challenge and I was like, Hayden, I promise I'm not lying. And I sent him screenshots and my computer had like 125 gigs of memory left. And it kept saying that my disk was full and it could not write to disk.
What?
And it wouldn't like save my files in my Xcode. It wouldn't let me like stage my changes and get nothing.
That's so weird.
It hates me, this laptop.
I was going to say, I encounter a lot more like abnormal errors when I'm writing Objective-C. But I mean, that would have been all in Swift when you were writing that Sprint Challenge project.
Yeah, well, and it's just like not the core data, the unit testing sprint that just disappeared.
That's so weird.
It is so weird.
Okay, is everyone to a point where it's working out for them? DC, are you still stuck?
Yeah, I'm good.
Give me 2 seconds.
You're good.
Go ahead.
My phone thought I said Siri and not CC.
That happens to me all the time.
I also laugh every time he calls you Sierra in the lesson.
No, he calls me
He calls you
Ciara.
Clara. Does he call
yeah.
you Clara? I thought he calls
No.
you Clara.
No, he calls me Ciara, and I hate that.
I can tell because I'm kind of the same way when people call me Mitchell because there's such a vibe with like my mom yelling at me and saying Mitchell like, and I get that too a lot. Even people that know me really well know that you call me Mitch. You know.
You prefer Mitch then?
I mean, either is fine, but
Okay.
it's just like if it's not someone I like, you guys would all be fine to call me that. But if it's someone I'm not like tight with or friends with, it's just it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. That's what it does.
I'm such a full name kind of girl. Like if I know your full name, I'll call you your full name.
See, that's fine with me. If it's a stranger and they know that like other people are calling me that, then I'm like, what? You know what I mean?
True. For the longest, people call me Alex, and I'm like, please call me Alexandra.
Hey, but your Zoom is Alex.
Yeah, so I've always called you Alex.
My main Zoom, that like my actual Zoom on my
Mhm.
laptop, is Alexandra.
Ah, I see. So you prefer Alexandra?
I mean, it makes me feel so like adult-like.
Yeah.
All right, Cece, how are you doing?
I am good.
We're
All
good to go?
better.
Okay, rad. I don't know why it did that. That's really weird. From now on, we'll just go ahead and drag them into the file folders, and then we should be okay. But we really don't need to subclass anything else, so it should be fine. Okay, let us get started. Let's go ahead with the model object first. We'll make it really simple. What I want to do to start out with is we're going to make some sort of fetch method in the controller that's going to populate here with those number of random users. And right now to start with, instead of doing a person name, because email is so simple, I'm just going to start with email. We'll just have the table view populate with the person's email. And then to check that the table view is working, we'll have this title changed to their email as well. And that way we know that our networking method works, and then you can move on. Because that's such a critical point in programming, is like start small, make sure things work, and then add on top. Because if you try it all at once, like things are just bound to break for sure. So we're going to start really small. Okay. So someone walk me through making a model object in Objective-C.
New file.
Yeah, new file.
Okay.
And then you subclass off NS object.
Yep. Quiz time. What is NS? Do you guys know?
Next
Next
step.
steps.
Next step. It's the pre-Apple like software base. Okay. And then well, I guess it doesn't really matter here, but just use your prefix, and then let's call it person. And then just go ahead and add it to your project. And I'm just going to drag mine into the model folder, because I don't know why that was being weird earlier, but it is what it is. Okay, cool. Let's get into the nitty gritty. So who wants to tell me the difference between, just to review, the difference between a .m file and a .h file?
.h is like public facing, and it just like holds stuff, and then the .m is mostly private, and it implements everything. It like actually does the stuff.
Exactly. That's like probably the best explanation that I would give is .h is a public facing class, and then .m is a private facing. It keeps it localized into the file. So there are reasons to do things in one rather than the other. As far as declarations go, we're going to declare things in .h so that they can be used in .m, especially because like as a person, we're going to want to be passing this person item around to different views. It's going to be going from model controller into the table view controller, and then into a detailed view controller. So we obviously want its properties to be public facing. So how would I make a property for an email?
With NS string.
Yep. But Objective-C is a little funky in that I have to add something first.
At property.
Yep. So we have add property NS string.
Pointer.
What? Pointer.
Email.
Yep. And then semicolon to end. So right now, that's all I care about my person. I only worry about what their email is. We'll tackle everything else in a bit. But once we make sure our networking is working, their data source is pulling information, and our table view has that all populated, then we'll be good to add some more, which I suggest doing tomorrow. I think that's a really good tactic. So let's go ahead and make an initializer so that whenever a new object is created, it's created in a certain fashion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do dash for an instance method. We have to add this instance type. And then what we're going to do here is I can just say init if I want to, but I want to be kind of descriptive about what it is. So I'm going to do init with email. And then after you've kind of wired up your init, this is kind of like writing func and then the name of the function in a similar fashion. Then we're going to do our parameter that we're passing in. So you do a colon, the parameter type, which in our case is an NS string, pointer. And then you're going to list the actual property that's being passed in, which is an email in this case. And right now, all we're needing to initialize is an email. So we're good there. Okay, now we're going to get to this in a little bit, but whenever you're working with JSON, 9 times out of 10, it's going to come back as a dictionary. We're going to have to rifle through a couple of layers of data to get what we want. And so that's what a dictionary is going to do. So we're going to want to initialize objects based on where they lie in a dictionary. So that's why we do this dash instance type. And then we have an init with dictionary that we're also going to need as well. This is going to make our life a lot easier when we're taking JSON data and turning it into a person. When you guys use Codable in Swift, this is all happening under the scenes. There's kind of like the Codable property is kind of rifling your model object to match with what the JSON is giving back. But in Objective-C, we don't have Codable, so we're going to have to do this instead. So that's why it feels kind of foreign, I would say, but we'll get through it. So it's going to be an NS dictionary, and we'll go ahead and pass in a certain dictionary that we're going to use. And you'll see this come into play in a little bit. But right now, for a header file, this is configured to what we need. Do you guys have any questions so far about what's been done?
So like, okay, say again what the dictionary is doing. Like,
so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up the JSON. And what we're getting back here as each person is actually a dictionary, right?
mm-hmm.
So when we're saying we're making a person object out of JSON, the dictionary that we're going to pass in is going to be all of this. But then instead of getting every single aspect out of it, right now all we care about is an email. So on the .m file, we're going to tell this, hey, in the dictionary, just find the email for me
mm-hmm.
and make a person out of it. So when we move into the .m file, I think this will answer your question, Alex.
Okay.
So let's hop over to that one. What I'd like to do is I'm just going to copy and paste 15 and 17 because we're going to need those properties. Sorry, we're going to need those initializers. I misspoke. So you can go ahead and paste those over. Okay, cool. So we've got 2 initializers that both will need to compute some sort of person. They're going to work in tandem. They're not separate. They're not making 2 different people. They're going to work together. Okay, so to make this first initializer, this is kind of the weird boilerplate Objective-C code that you guys have learned. Do you guys remember how to go about writing this initializer, this first one?
It's okay, I can't remember if the self or the init part is first or the if self is first.
So the if self is first, and we actually don't need to write init because it's already up here, we're good.
Okay.
If you guys write the basic init method, you can see it and it's really easy. I can just go down a little bit lower. For some reason, my autocomplete isn't working, which is really sad. Well, I'll show you in a little bit if autocomplete turns out, but what we're going to do here is we're going to say if self is equal to super.init, meaning like this is the main init that's going on here, then we can go ahead and initialize those properties. And we always have to make sure we return self. So this is just like boilerplate Objective-C code that you have to remember. When you guys write Swift classes and you do your initializers, this is happening under the hood. It does it for you because Swift is awesome. Okay, and now we've got just an email to initialize. So how do I go about taking care of initializing that email?
Underscore email equals email.
Yep. And it should be auto-populating. It's not, I'm sorry, but it is what it is. Okay, cool. So what's happening here is we're passing in some sort of information and it's going to make a person out of it, is what this initializer is doing. Now we could make this anywhere, but we want to make it specifically with our JSON dictionary, because I could make people all day long, but if I'm going to call a network method that already has people that I can pull out of it, I don't need to necessarily make brand new people. So that's why this lines 20 through 22 are going to be really, really helpful. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a peek at Insomnia. And I want to find email because that's the property I'm concerned about right now. So assuming that we get back a dictionary from this array, assuming that we get this back, we're just looking for a key value called email. And then that is going to return back a string for us. So this is how I would set that up. And this will all really click for you guys here in a second. What I'm going to say is, give me back a string that is called email. And I want you to get it from a dictionary looking for the specific key value of email. If you look here, we're going to pass in a dictionary. In our network method, we're going to turn a JSON into this NS dictionary class, and it'll be really easy to use. That's what NSJSONSerialization does. So if we get that dictionary back, this initializer will say, hey, you've got a dictionary. I've got a key value for you to find. It's called @email, or just email. And if you find it, make a string out of whatever is at that key value. So in Insomnia, what's happening here is the initializer runs and it scans through until it finds email. And then it says, okay, I'm looking for a string. And there's a string. I want chloe.addy@example.com. And it will return that back for us. And then once it returns it, if it hits all the properties that we've given it, right now it's just email. But if I had like name, email, phone number, right? If it hits all those properties, then it can make a person out of them. And then that person can be then populated in our table view, and we can use it in our app. It'll be really modular. Okay, so if we get that property from the JSON, then all we have to do now is return self is our people object, and we're going to return a person with email. I have to be really careful because my auto-populate's not working. Init with email, and then we'll pass in email. And that will give us back a person. Is this clicking a little bit for you guys?
Say that one more time.
Okay, so do you mean 23 or do you just mean all of it?
23.
Okay, so 23 is saying return just means give me back. Self is referencing the file that we're in. In this particular case, it's our person class. So it's saying return a person that has been initialized with that email property. So it's taking the JSON dictionary. We'll do it later here in a little bit. It's taking the JSON dictionary. Inside the dictionary, it's looking for that email key. And then it will give us back that Chloe Addy at example.com. And then it says, hey, make a person with that email so that we can use it later. You guys will see this happen once we make the network method. You'll be like, wow, this is awesome.
I'll periodically ask you to say it again because I hear it once and I let that go into my brain, and then I want to hear it one more time to write it as a comment.
Perfect. Let's do it. Yeah, every time you need to do that, let me know, because that's what I'm here for sure. I know we haven't had a lot of chances to stop instructors and chat about what's going on, and like I feel like this will be a really good chance for you guys to do that today. So, okay. So in theory, this is actually all we need right now. If we want to make a person with just an email, we're set. We're really good. It's probably like starting to click in your head there. You're like, if we added a phone number, this is how I would go into the JSON and do it. And we'll do that later. But right now, our person is configured and we're taken care of there. So like I said, make regular commits. I always hound you guys about that, but it's important. So I'm going to say configure model object. And we're good. Okay, awesome. Okay, so our model object's taken care of for now. let's move into the networking part. So I'm going to make a Cocoa Touch class, and it's going to be a MB, whatever your prefix is, person controller. Okay. So we've got our person controller. I'm going to clean up the file a little bit here. Make some space that we're going to do some magic in. Okay. And then right off the top of your head, well, I guess it's probably better to import as you think things are necessary to add in. That's fine. So if we're going to make a person and we're going to do a network method, this might be a bad question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. If we're going to make a person out of our JSON, what do you think we're going to do with that person to make it usable in our table view?
Create an actual person.
I mean, the init's going to do that for us. So the person's going to be created in the method. But once we have that person, like, how do we get that to, like, how are we going to show that in the table view?
Oh, so we need an array for people.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay, I was worried that I asked this really dumb question.
I was like,
okay, so like we said, for properties, I mean, we didn't do it with our person property, which we probably should have, is done like non-atomic copy. I'm not super worried about it tonight because everything will work regardless, but you can add those property attributes if you want to. So we're going to make an NS array, and we're going to call it people, or plural people. And I'm doing this public facing, right? Because our table view controller needs to know about this, and potentially our detail view might need to know about this array of people as well. Probably not, but at least the table view controller will need to know. So we've got that. The other thing, oh, my autocomplete's working again, guys. This is great. Okay. The other thing that we need to do is we need to make our search method or some sort of fetch method to get these people. So if I was going to kind of declare a method here in the header class that can be used in other classes, how would I start to write some sort of method?
dash and then your return object.
A void.
We're going to do a void, and you'll see why. Most of the time it will be void, but we'll see why. And then what comes next?
The name?
Yeah. So let's call it search for people. And then we're going to get a little bit funky. Really, this is how you write a completion block in Objective-C. So what we're going to do is we're going to say void, because that's our return type. If we hit completion and it's nil, we want to void out of the function. And then we do that little funky up arrow. And we also want to potentially get an error back from it so that we get some sort of information about why it failed out. That's going to be important to know about. The last thing that we're going to do is we're going to call completion. So the syntax for this is a little funky, but it's just in a different way than you guys are used to writing it. Because like in Swift, we say like func, search for people, and then we have some sort of like completion, escaping, and then it turns into like void or error, whatever, right? I'm not writing this very well, and that just goes to show too that if you take too many days of Objective-C, you'll forget your Swift. But it's similar. You guys have written things that are exactly similar to this. So just follow the syntax and know that you've already done this in Swift before. It's just written a little funky here. Okay, cool. Now that we've got this declared, let's go ahead.
Wait.
Sorry.
Hold on.
You're good.
What? This is the return. This is the name. What is this?
That is what's, it's the parameters that are going into it. We're passing in a placeholder error so that we can get back some sort of error if it happens, but we're really not worried about a whole lot else. So if you really want to just run a networking method and you only care about the error and the completion, this is how you would write it. Because at this point, we just want to say, hey, if there's an error, we want to know about it. And then we want to have some sort of completion ability. so that if we run into an error, we can call completion and get out. Or once the method works and it does what we want to, then we can also call completion and get out of it.
It's like a completion handler, right?
Yep, this is a completion handler. That's probably a better explanation, CC, is like this is our completion handler. This takes care of letting us get in and out of the function. Not in, I guess, just getting out of. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy it and come over to this file and open it up. That's where we're gonna compute so that some magic stuff happens. Okay, we're gonna add a couple more things. And the reason that I'm gonna do this will become a lot more apparent in a little bit. If you guys wanted to declare a private property or a private method, does someone want to talk me through how I could do that here in the .m file?
Add the interface at the top.
So I do @interface, and then you can do like a super class here if you want to, but we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to give it the class name, which is our MB person controller. And then you have to just do open and close parentheses. Don't ask me why you have to do open and close parentheses. It's just, maybe it's a placeholder for the class, but.
So what does this do?
So this is going to allow us to do private properties that can live just in this file, whereas anything that's in the .h can be public. And you'll see kind of why we're gonna do that here in a second, but what we're gonna do is we're going to make another array, but it's going to be mutable. So we're gonna make a mutable array, and we're gonna call this one internal people. We call it internal because it's just going to live inside the controller. So the controller can do the work of managing the people inside this array, and then we can use a more public array to display that to other views that need to know about it. They won't need to modify it, but they'll need to know about it. Okay, cool. And then the last thing that I'm gonna do is once some work has happened on this internal people property, we wanna set it equal to this people that we've set publicly. So I'll just use a computed property to do that. It's not gonna be hard because it's already kind of pre-written. So if you start to write people, you'll see the public facing class, sorry, the public facing property that we've made. And then you can just make a computed property out of it like that. So then in order to set internal people equal to this external people is we just say return self.internal people. So we can let internal people worry about what's being added on this search method. And then we can let the external people worry about showing it. It's just a matter of managing your data correctly. I mean, you don't want things to know about other things that they don't need to. So we'll let the controller do what it needs to do, and then we'll have a public array of the stuff it gathers to display elsewhere. This is probably good practice to have in your Objective-C apps, I would say.
So line 20 is essentially just returning the internal people as the people array.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Now what we're going to do here is we can't do anything with this internal people array yet because it's a property, but it hasn't been created into space. It doesn't exist yet. So how do I create this internal people so that it can exist and do things?
Initialize it?
Yep. So here's the part where we can say, we can just go to this init. You hit enter, it will autocomplete with all the nice stuff that you need, which it's literally the same as our kind of custom initializer. If you look here in our person file, we did this init with email, but it's generally the exact same. This one that populates here. Okay, so trailing off initializing, how do I bring it into existence? How do I buy some land for it so it can live?
All I know is alloc.
Yes, you're on the right path. So here, what we're gonna do, inside your, just remember, like inside here, we did an underscore property and set it equal to something. We're gonna do, hey, the internal arrays that lives, internal people that lives in this file, set it equal to a brand new array. NS mutable array. And then here's where the alloc comes in. You give it a space to live, and you let it exist in that space with init. So when we declare the property up here, yeah, it can live in the class, but it doesn't necessarily mean it exists yet. When we initialize it, then it exists. Then it can do things. It has abilities to engage with other code. Do you guys have questions about what we've done so far? This is giving us a warning on the people. So if you go back to the .h, it's giving us a warning because it's an atomic property. So let's go ahead and make it non-atomic. And then the warning should go away. There we go. So all I did there is I just went back to the people in the .h and changed the property attribute to atomic, non-atomic, I'm sorry. All right. You guys with me so far?
Line 27. Say it again.
So the internal people, the idea of internal people is up here, right? It doesn't actually exist yet, but it's a property that can exist. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. So like in theory, if you have a house, it probably has a bedroom and it could have a bed in it. But you go into the house after you've bought it and yeah, there's a bedroom, but there's no bed in the house. So this is the idea that like a bedroom should have a bed. Our class should have a property called internal people. This is the manner of buying the bed and putting it in the house. So it's saying, hey, this should have internal people. So let's go ahead and make it exist with init. The alloc does the work of buying the space in memory for us. Does that make sense, CC? Okay. That was a really like wrangly analogy that I couldn't think of a really good one on the fly, but okay, cool. Let's get into the search for people part.
I'm getting an error on the initializer on the self equals super init with coder, the part that was already, oh, I clicked the wrong one. Never mind, continue.
You're good. The init with coder and the init with nib, those ones go in collection files. So like table view controllers, collection view controllers, those are where those come into play. And we'll use one of those here in a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. So let's power through. We'll make the networking function, and then we'll probably take a quick break, and then the rest will be pretty seamless. We'll get through it pretty quick. Okay. I'd say this is the hardest part, is making our networking function. Okay. So if I wanted to make a static property for our base URL, I posted it in the channel for you guys to use. But if I wanted to make a static property for this, how am I going to do that?
Do we want it to be available to everything?
The controller is the only one that needs to know about it, so we can keep it inside of this controller file.
Okay.
Yep. The way that we're going to do it is we're going to say static, just like we do in Swift, actually. And then at first, we're going to do an NS string. And then const is that property that says it cannot be changed. It's like a let. It's going to remain this exact way that we set it up as. And it already has the pointer attached to that const. They kind of are going to work together. Kind of like how we talked about in class today, the pointers reference where they live in memory, the address of where they live. So it makes sense that the constant would be attached to the pointer because it's like, hey, it lives here and it's going to stay there forever. And then we got to give it a name. So let's call it base URL string. And then this is going to be an Objective-C string. And then go ahead and just paste that results query URL, the one that's in the channel. That's the exact one that I copied there. And that's all you need. That's our base URL string. So like tomorrow, if you need to modify, you're going to definitely want to declare a static NS string so that when you pass it through like query items or maybe want to tack something onto the end of it, it'll be good that it doesn't change. You know, it'll stay the same, then you can just add things on top of it. Okay, cool. So we've got our base URL. What I'm going to do here is I think I'm just going to power through this because it's very reusable code. Like it's code that you guys will use tomorrow in some sense, and it's going to be really helpful going forward every time you write a networking function in Objective-C. So if you have questions as we go, we'll chat about them. But for the most part, I think we'll just fire through and start typing. So first thing I'm going to do is I've got a string, but I want to turn it into an actual URL. I'm like getting worried about whatever that text was. Okay, so base URL, and then we're going to turn that into, we're going to turn our base URL string into a URL. Oh, it sounded so redundant. I'm sorry that I didn't word that well for you guys. But the way that we do that is do square brackets, NS URL, and then there's a property called URL with string. We don't care about this relative to URL one. We just care about passing in this. So in here, we're going to pass in our base URL string, colon. So, I mean, in this particular app, we didn't actually tweak anything on our base URL string up here. So we really wouldn't need to declare a constant, but it is good practice. So declare kind of the bare bones what the search query needs to start with. And then in here, you can kind of tweak it as a URL. Okay, next thing, now we open up our URL session data task. And you guys do this all the time in Swift. So it's not super unfamiliar. But we're going to declare the type as a data task. And then you just have to set it equal to an NS URL session. Whoa. And then NS URL session has a shared session property. You guys use this all the time. You just do URL session.shared. This is just the Objective-C way to do it. And then it has this property called data task with URL. So you can do it as a request too. You could format a request if you wanted to. We're just going to use a URL tonight. They're really interchangeable a lot of the time, but I think we'll be okay with just a URL. So there's two that we can use. We can just use a URL, or we can use one with a completion handler. And this is the one that we're going to want to use because we're going to want to make this network query and run some code inside of it. So click the one with the completion handler. And then for the data task with URL, go ahead and pass in your base URL. And then like we always do with completion handlers, just double click them and they'll open up. So you guys have seen this before. There's a data, there's a response, and there's an error. So that should be fairly familiar to you. We've used those before. Okay. I'm gonna, first off, this is probably good practice too, going forward for you guys. Do this right as soon as you open up this closure, and then you won't have to worry about it later. Right here, you're gonna have to declare a colon. And then below it, do you guys remember what we have to do here?
Resume.
Yep. Data task, resume, and then that one needs a colon as well. And that way, you know, that's out of the way and done, and you won't have to worry about it anymore. Cool. So this resume is actually what's going to execute the data task. It's going to be like kind of pressing enter if we were going to relate it to us looking on a URL, like typing it in a web browser. That's what resume does. It executes the actual session data task to go. So that's going to do the work. So if you don't include data task resume, nothing's going to fire. You've probably run into that before when we did our networking sprint. Okay, so we've got a couple of things here. And this is going to be a little bit different from what you're used to in Swift. And that's fine because it's really reusable. So the first thing I want to do is check for an error. So we're going to say if error. If there's an error, we want to see what's going to happen, see what's going on with it. For this one, for the sake of time, we're not going to write out super detailed error messages. We'll do them on a couple that I feel like will be useful. But if there's an error, I just want to zero out of the function. So we're going to call completion. Remember, completion just means, hey, get out, like end this, complete it. And then it calls for 2 parameters. The nil is calling for, let me see if I can figure this out here. So the response here is nullable. The data is also nullable and the error is nullable, but we want to know about the error. So if you hit nil for the first parameter, wait, too many errors on call block, expected 1, have 2. What? I did this earlier and it was totally fine. What? Well, let's hit return and see if it does. If this yells at me, I'm gonna be sad. What? Why is this being so stupid? Oh, just do error. I'm sorry. Just do error. Because these other guys can be nullable. So like our data, our response, they can be nullable. We only really care about the error if we have one. So it's saying, hey, if we have an error, call completion and print out, give us the error that's going on here. You guys have done this before. This isn't new for you, this kind of error handling. This kind of error handling is going to be new. So here we're going to declare an NS error, and I'm going to call it JSON error. And at first, we're going to set it to nil. Because we can't do optionals in Objective-C. They have to either be nil or they have to be a value. Okay. And then here's where we make the magic happen with that Json serialization. This is probably the most important part that I want you guys to take out of today. NS dictionary and declare it as a JSON. And then now we're going to use NSJSONSerialization to use a property called JSON object with data. Okay, now if you make the Insomnia request here, we call this network query, we hit send, and it gives us back this information here. So what this is going to do is we're going to say, hey, make a dictionary out of the data that comes back from the data task. Options, you can just put 0. 0 meaning nil or none. And then for this error, we are going to pass in our JSON error. And I think you're going to have to put an ampersand here. Yeah, so right before this JSON error, you put an ampersand because it refers to where the JSON error is coming from, not the actual error. Don't ask me to describe any more of that. I don't know. I just know that that's what you're supposed to do. Okay, so what we're saying here is turn whatever you get back from the data task into this JSON property. I mean, we can call it whatever we want, but we call it JSON because that's, that's what it is. And then here we'll say, hey, if there is a JSON error, and usually what you guys would write in Swift is you would say, if data equals nil, we're doing a similar thing here. We're saying, hey, if there's an error with the JSON, call completion. I think we probably could say data equals nil and do a kind of error handling with that, but I'm not sure exactly why it's different in Objective-C. Okay, so this is taking care of the error with the network call. This is taking care of the error with data if it happens to be there. The last kind of error handling that we're going to do, and you guys could skip all of these if you wanted to, but to be good programmers, we're obviously going to want to, check why our methods aren't working. The last thing we're going to do, oh, sorry, what's up?
The first error is an error with the network call.
Correct.
And the second error is what?
It deals with the data. So we called it JSON error up here. This deals with the data that came back from the network request. Okay, cool. The last thing we're going to do is we are going to check that the JSON is a dictionary, because if we get back some sort of other data type, it's going to really screw up the way that we've set this up. Because, I mean, we want our types to be congruent. If we're expecting a dictionary, we want to see a dictionary. And if it's not a dictionary and it's an array, or it's an array of dictionaries or something, we want to know about it so that we can configure our model to do what it needs to do. So I'm going to say if is not. So if our JSON is kind of class, we did this in class on Tuesday, I believe. In here, we're going to say NS dictionary class. So what this line of code is doing, this not is really critical. It's saying if our JSON is not of type NS dictionary. This is how we're going to error handle if we're expecting a dictionary and it's not a dictionary. Then we can just say, this is probably the one place I would say is the most helpful to put in an error handling message. You can do an NS log and say, JSON was not a dictionary as expected. Because you guys have probably run into this error before where you'll print out on the console when you run your network method and it's like something expected to get a string, but it got a dictionary instead, blah, blah, blah. This is going to be the error message that's the most helpful in that regard. Because if you probably haven't noticed, Objective-C error handling isn't awesome. It's not very good. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to call completion if that's the case. And here we normally would be able to type in error, but I don't think it's going to let us. Let's try. I think it might. If you look here, we made a separate error for our JSON data, and then this error was directly attributed to the data task. So if we write error here, it's going to be kind of ambiguous about what error we're talking about. So what we can do instead is we can just make a new error with an alloc init. And then at the time of completion, it'll just print out that new error for us. It doesn't necessarily need like a name, but I mean, if we ever hit this point in the code where it's like, hey, you didn't get a dictionary back, this message is already going to tell us that. So, I mean, that's pretty indicative for us, but we still need to call completion. Okay, so that was just error handling. I know that was a lot, and it's kind of silly because technically, the only line of code we actually need from this is 45. It's the only line of code that's necessary in order to like have success. But we're going to do a lot of error handling because if your method isn't working, there's no other way to know. Okay.
So line 45 is actually doing the decoding?
Line 45 is, I wouldn't say decoding. That's more of like a codable specific thing. What it's doing is it's taking what it's getting back here and turning it into a property for us, which in this case, we called it JSON as a dictionary. It already is a dictionary, but you know, we know that, and that's why we set it to be of type dictionary. We just want to be able to use it in our app. So this is going to do the work of saying, the data task gave me JSON, let me condense it into something I can use in my app. That's what line 45 is doing. Okay, cool. Now, next thing here, and you guys will encounter this tomorrow. We did this with the Jedi project. This results thing is, if you look, if I keep scrolling, results only shows up one time. Because results is a key value for an array of people objects. So what we need now is we need to declare that array of people in this function. And I'll show you how to do that. So you're going to say NS array. And we're actually going to call it results. But you could call it, let's call it fetched people for the sake of being explicit. So fetched people. And then if you remember, here in our .m file, we went into this dictionary and then gave it a key value. We're going to do the same exact thing here. But instead of going into a dictionary, we're going to go into this specific dictionary that we got back. This is like doing coding keys on the fly. So we'll say JSON and look for results. So line 45 turned that entire huge file of JSON into a property for us to use. And then line 56 went one level deeper to get this array of results. Does that make sense? Did I say that weird? Hopefully that's clicking a little bit. You'll see it even more here in just a second. Okay, cool.
Say it one more time.
Okay, so line 45, when we call the data task method, it's going to give us back all of this information. Everything that's in here, it's going to give us back that. Now, it's really not usable quite yet until we give it a place to live locally on the app. So that's why we set it equal to a dictionary called JSON. If I go back to Insomnia, you'll see that it starts with a curly brace, so you know that that's a dictionary. To go one level deeper, we have to do a little bit of work. We're not going to get it for free. So to go one level deeper, we have to look for a certain key value, in this case results, and inside that key value lives an array, which I've used this API before, but if it was a new API, you'd have to look through just to know that. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom of this results, this isn't relevant here at the bottom, it's just additional information, but this is the closing brace of the array. So there's multiple people inside. You know what, I'm gonna close it down to just 2 so you guys can see it really well. Actually, let's do 1. So if I do just 1 person, here's the first bracket, and there is the second bracket right there. See, this is just giving us information back about the query, but this is the final bracket. So I know that the JSON, if I go one level deeper of the dictionary up here, it's an array. So that's why I created this NS array of fetched people. Hopefully that is clicking a little bit. Okay. Okay. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to do a for loop. And you guys kind of have done this before, but you'll see why this is going to work here in a second. So we're going to do an NS mutable array, and we're going to call it people. Okay. Actually, on line 56, instead of saying fetched people, let's call it fetched data. That'll be more explicit. So the fetched data. And then in the NS mutable array, let's call this one fetched people. You guys will see why I'm calling it that here in just a second. Just like anytime we make like a malleable object that we want to mess around with that doesn't have anything in it yet, we've got to allocate space. So we've got to do an NS mutable array and then alloc init. Nothing crazy is happening here. It's just we're making an empty array. Okay, and then the method's pretty much done at this point. We just have to do the for loop that's going to cycle through this fetch data and put people into our fetched people array. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to do a for loop. So we're going to say for, and then open parentheses is how we do them in Objective-C. So for this dictionary in result, we didn't call it results, did we? We called it, what did we call it? Fetch data, maybe? Yeah. Yeah. So for a dictionary and fetch data, and I'll tell you why we're going to do a dictionary once we finish this. I'll walk through the entirety of the code, and I think it will make more sense at that point. Now, every time we cycle through the fetch data, we want to pull out a person that matches our criteria. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to the top of the class, and our criteria is our model object. So go ahead and import your person. Okay. All right, once you got your person imported, now in this for loop, we can make a person every time it matches our criteria. And you'll see how this is going to happen here. We'll say MB person, give it a name of person, and then set it equal to a new person object. And then, do you guys remember when we made that a init with dictionary? We're going to use that here. And we're going to pass in dictionary. The last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to say fetched people, add object, person. So that's the for loop that's cycling through JSON data, and every time it matches our MB person criteria, it's going to add that to an array. And then the last thing, last and final line of code.
Looping through JSON data.
Yeah, let's write this one last line, and then let's go through, we'll talk lines 57 all the way down, just so it makes perfect sense for you guys.
Okay.
So this last thing, we've got this kind of living inside of our function, we've got this fetch people, right? This lives in the function, but in the class itself, we made an internal people array. So we're just going to set them equal to each other here so that it can kind of hop out of the function and work in the controller. So you can say self.internal people is equal to our fetched people. And then hopefully at this point, everything works. We can call completion and go ahead and pass your fetched people in as the success marker of the data that you got back. What? Do we have to just call nil maybe? Yeah, that's probably fine. Maybe we'll have to come back and tweak that. Let's see here. Fetch people, nil. Now let's just call nil. I'll tell you why in a bit. Okay, so to reiterate, let's talk through how this is all working. So we run a data task. The data task works based off of a base URL. And so we had that up here, right? It's just this URL that's going to give us 20 results back, 20 people back. So that fires off. We do some error handling here. And then line 46 is really critical. What line 46 is doing is it's saying, here's a place to live for all the information that comes from the URL. So if I go to a browser and I type in this URL up here, it's just going to give me all this info. Like, it's not going to be very clean and usable. But if I turn it into something that has property, something that has space in our code, then we can kind of store it for use. So this line of code copies everything from the JSON and gives it a place to live, kind of temporarily in our function, really. Then, we do some more error handling to check if there's an error with the JSON and to make sure the JSON is a dictionary. Now here is where it's really important to pay attention to how the JSON is organized, because the very first thing was a big, huge dictionary. The very next level down is an array. It's an array of dictionaries. So line 57 sets up that next level movement to go down a space. Go from the big dictionary and move down a space into the array. That's why the key value of results is really nice, because it's going to check this keyword, and then it has a place to store everything that comes back from the array. And then finally, we want to give that data a place to live, kind of in foresight, kind of knowing that that's going to need to be stored somehow. We're going to need to create people and then kind of file them into a list. So that's why we made this fetch people array. It just can kind of be a temporary spot that if this fetch data meets our criteria, we can funnel it into an array of people. In Swift, what you would say here on line 58 is you would say var fetched people, and then you would give it type person and set it equal to an empty array. That's all we did on line 58. It's just a space for the data to come back and live in. Now here, this is where, again, it's important to check the JSON and just make sure it's the right thing, because once we go a level deeper here in the array, then it's a dictionary. It's a dictionary here. That's how far the dictionary goes for this person. This is all going to come back at once you go one level deeper. So then what we're going to do is we're going to say cycle through every dictionary in our fetch data. We're doing this is kind of crazy to think about. You're for looping to check dictionaries in an array, which is wild. So check each dictionary, just like what I highlighted and showed you a second ago. This is just one of the dictionaries that's going to get for looped through. And every time it matches our MB person model object, create it, init with the dictionary. Take this dictionary that we have and create a person out of it. And then once the person has been created, append it to the empty array of the fetched people. Finally, because this is all happening in the class, it's not really useful to like make an array and only let it live in the class, or sorry, only let it live in the function. We want to set it equal to something externally so that it can be reused. So we had this private variable of internal people. What we can do is say, inside the model controller, take that empty array of internal people and set it into be equal to the fetched people array, which was initially empty, and then hopefully after the for loop is full of people that match our model object. Okay, what questions do you guys have? I hope I didn't just completely confuse you.
So that star dictionary on line 60 inside the for loop, that's kind of like how we do for loop in Swift. You're just declaring a new variable, or is it a reference to something else?
Yep, the way that I would do it in Swift is I would just say for dictionary in fetch data, and that's going to check all the dictionaries.
Okay. I'm confused because like, when does it go into, you know what we made in our person model file?
Yep.
I'm confused because we also called that dictionary too. It's different from what we're doing here, right?
Yes, they are different. So
okay.
let's be more verbose and call this person dictionary. Call it person dictionary, and then that will help kind of clear it up for you, because if you look at Insomnia, every time this is going through a dictionary here, it's just what we're hoping is going to turn into a person, because this is one singular person's information.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool, rad. All right, guys, how do you feel about this networking method?
Lots of error handling, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if we wanted to be kind of lazy programmers, we could just exit out of it. I know that it's going to work, but you know, if you tomorrow don't know that your code's going to work, you're going to be really happy to have these errors. Which in reality, you can copy and paste a lot of this code tomorrow. Wink, wink. It'll be really helpful. The difference being tomorrow is that you're going to pass in a search term rather than just get a big array, which we did on the Jedi project. We did it on the Star Wars project. So, okay, cool. Well, we are 20 minutes over when I wanted to take a break. So let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll circle back here, and it'll be really easy to just check to make sure our method works. And then the rest is just pretty quick, just wiring everything up. So I'll see you guys back here in about 5 minutes.
Mitch, do you mind scrolling down all the way to the bottom? I think I missed something.
Here, let me, whoa. How's that?
That's good, thanks.
Okay, all right, I'll see you guys back here in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, guys. You guys are troopers. I know this has been a tough week learning a new language, so I commend you. And thanks for doing after hours with me, even though you're probably like, coding is the last thing I want to do right now.
My brain is just a little fried.
Yeah.
I wish I was more engaged, but I'm trying.
It's hard. I think more than anything, it's just nice to have like references, like tools to use, especially tomorrow when you're like, how do I do this thing? You know, it's going to be way better to like have code available to you to like reuse rather than trying to learn it again. So,
True. Yeah.
all right. So the last part is stuff that you guys already know how to do because we did a lot of it yesterday afternoon, like table view data source methods, and like that's pretty much it. So what we're gonna do here is let's close out. We know our model and our model controller should hopefully be fleshed out and good. Let's head into the table view and start to check and see if we can get some data to pull up. First thing that I know off the top of my head, in order to trigger that search method that we just made, we've got to have a controller. I'm gonna do a non-atomic just because it will probably yell at us if we don't. And then we need an instance of our controller. So go ahead and import your controller. Okay. And then you should be able to go ahead and make a person controller. So remember, when you declare the property publicly like this, it is kind of like a placeholder, but it won't do anything until we initialize it. That's going to be really important. Like we talked about on the first day, you know, you guys were running into that error and Paul was like, go figure out why it's not working. It's because it wasn't being initialized. Your code will probably look a tiny bit different than mine because I did clean it up, but nothing is different in here. I think I just added person cell while you guys were reclassing your files earlier.
Can you go back to your H file, please?
Yep.
For some reason, I can't import my controller.
Is it not auto-completing?
I think so, yeah.
Just type it word for word, because sometimes if they live in a different folder, the file navigator has a hard time finding it. But if you type it out word for word, it can still find it.
Okay.
That's what I was having trouble with. I was just behind because I had to type everything out.
Oh, it's so dumb.
Oh,
I know.
yeah.
That's my fault for organizing the files, because I like that's how I like to do it. But whoops, sorry. Okay, you guys good there?
It's still giving me an error, but I think we can go on. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll debug it here in a second. It should work. It's a little weird. So the only thing I added here was the cells identifier, that person cell. And that's it. Number of sections we don't need. We can take care of that. All right, so let's dig in. Now, the first thing I want to do is make sure that I initialize our person controller. So can someone walk me through how I would do that? Because in Swift, you would say let person controller equal person controller, and then that would be it. You would be done. But how do I do it here in Objective-C?
Instance type?
Yep, we're going to do this init with
Init with coder.
Yep, those work in our collection files. And then here to initialize it, you're going to do underscore, which is like the placeholder, right? The one in the .h file. This is what it's referencing here. We're going to set it equal to an MB person controller, and then allocate space and create within it. And there we go. In our model controller file, it was just a blueprint, but now it exists. Now this person controller can actually work. Okay, so we made that method for searching for people, but how and where do we want to have this method triggered?
Say that again.
That search for people method that we made, when do we want that to fire?
When the user hits return.
Yeah, well, the nice thing is it can do it like from the get-go, because we don't have the user requiring any input to do it. Because like if you had a search bar, you'd type something in and hit enter. But this one was just a search. It just gave us a big list back. So what we can do is we can just do it in view did load. So like as soon as the view loads, it'll just fire it and look for them. So the way that you're going to do that is inside brackets, you'll say self.personController. And then if you do a space, you can access the method, the search for people method. So search for people, and then go ahead and open up that closure. And then for here, let's just close that off with a semicolon so it doesn't yell at us. What am I going to do inside this closure? This calls back to a lesson several weeks ago. Whenever you change something UI related, what do you want to do it on?
I was thinking like reload table view.
Yes, okay, we're gonna do it, but anything that is like top layer changing UI, we're gonna do it on the main thread.
Yes.
Oh, dispatch.
Yep. So dispatch underscore async. And usually the first one is good enough to pop up, this dispatch async. Okay, so if you click on the second one, it'll open up that closure. And CC, you're exactly right. This is where we're going to call self.tableview reload data. So on the main thread, we want to refresh. This is going to yell because it needs these guys need some semicolons here. And then how do we do it on the main queue? Because dispatch async does it asynchronously, but it doesn't necessarily give us a queue like dispatch group.main.async like we're used to in Swift. This one is dispatch underscore. This main is misleading. We're going to do get main queue. So this is really good boilerplate code just right here. Like for using asynchronous UI updating methods in a table view on Objective-C, like this is what you're always going to want to do, probably in the view did load or in like a search bar method, right? Cool. So that's going to fire when our user opens the app, but they won't necessarily see anything until we configure these data source methods. So what should I do for returning the number of rows in section?
The person controller dot people dot count.
Yep, perfect. Ideally, there are a couple of people that got added to that array that we made in the method, and then that method in the array got set to the external array of people, and then that's what this is right here. Okay, and then for the cell, how do I go about taking care of the cell here?
Something, 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 index path dot row.
We got to make, so in Swift, we would say let person equal controller dot people dot, this is spelled wrong, but people and then index path, blah, 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 right? How are we going to do that in Objective-C?
Would you do your MB person?
Yep, and it's not there yet because I've got to import.
Oh.
So we're going to import mb person.h. Sorry, I know you guys probably have to type that out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to copy and paste from yours at the end because it is too much to do that right now.
All right. That's probably my fault for setting the project
No,
up
you're
than
good.
it is. Okay. So then we declare person. And then you're right, CC, we do self.personController.people and then indexPath.row.
Exactly. Something, 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 indexPath.row.
There you go. And then to change the cell, we want the cell's label to update to be whatever's in our model, which right now it's just an email, right? We only have an email, which is totally fine. So we'll do cell.textLabel.text is equal to our person.email. Okay, cool. Now here is the moment of truth. You finally have your table view data source methods to fire depending on if this, this method actually worked. So I'm going to run the simulator. Let you guys see it here. There we go. Magic. It's almost like I knew it was going to do it or something. There we go. So it's pulling out the person's information. Okay, now let's go one step further and make sure that we can pass this to the detail view. And then pretty much from there, everything is like pretty easy. Okay, do you guys remember how to do a segue in Objective-C?
Start with an if and do the name of the segue.
Yep, so you're going to do an open parentheses and then an open brace. Segue dot identifier. And then there's an is equal to property. And then in here, we're going to pass in, I called it show person detail. That's what the identifier is called in the storyboard. Okay. What else do I need to include in our segue? What am I trying to pass here?
Controller and the person.
The nice thing here is we don't even need to pass a controller because we're going to click on a cell and we only care about the person that is on the cell that's tapped. So we only need to pass person. So that's just like one less thing to worry about. So let's go kind of preemptively set that up here in our .h file of our detail view. So you just make an app property. You're going to have to import your person. I'm going to make it non-atomic. And then I'll just say MV person. And that'll be kind of the receiver from the segue. So it'll tap on a cell, it'll make sure it's got the right person, and the segue can pass this person into the detail view. Okay, cool. Now, before we can pass it, we still need a couple of things.
You need the index path for the row. That way we know which one is selected.
Yep, so we'll have to do an NS index path. We'll call it index path. And we set that equal to the self, which is referencing our table view controller. Table view, and then there's that index path for selected row, which is really nice. It just does the work of saying the user tapped this one, so get that index path. So that's super nice. We're still missing one thing before we can pass that person. It's like we've got the mail.
Oh, the destination
Yes,
view controller.
we got to have an address. We've got to have an address. So we need to declare that type of wherever we're sending it to. So at the very top of your class, you're going to want to import the header for your detail view controller, aka the address of where you're sending your object. So if I come here, then I can finally say MB person detail view controller. And I'm just going to call it destination VC. That's where we're sending it to, the destination view controller. And then all we're, the only nice thing that we're getting out of this function really is just this segue, but it does let us do segue dot destination view controller. It's just saying like, hey, you're sending it to this place. Now the last thing, if everything went well, we should be able to say destination BC, and this is how you'll check that you did your work right. Once you hit dot, you should be able to access your person on the other end. And what am I going to set this person on the other end equal to?
Self.
Self.
Dot person controller dot person, or people.
Dot people, and then because we got that, this is where the index path comes into play. Now we can say index path dot row. Line 55 did the work of finding what lives in that cell that the user tapped on, so that we don't have to later. Okay. Cool, cool. And this will be really helpful tomorrow, I think. All right, last thing, wrap it up here. Let's do two things. Number one, we want to do a did set. We definitely want to do a did set. Do you guys remember, it isn't called did set, somewhat similar. Do you guys remember how to do it?
It's like set something, right?
Yep, so it's set, and then it's whatever your model name is called. Set person. That's what the did set is. And then do you guys remember the weird jargon from yesterday about how to do this? It's tricky.
Oh, is it like something like person? Oh, you have to like do some like weird unwrapping thing.
Yeah, so it's like if person does not equal the person placeholder, aka nil, right? Because before the segue, this is non-existent. But after the segue, it exists. So we're saying, hey, if this person isn't empty, if it's not nil, then we can make the placeholder equal to the one that came through the segue. And the last thing we'll want to do is we'll want to make some sort of update views method, so that once we get a new person, it'll trigger and say, do something here. So let's go ahead and make that update views. Well, I'm making spaces here that I shouldn't. Here we go. Okay, cool. Now just to do a check, what we'll do is we'll say our self dot, and self is referencing our detail view. So our self dot title, we're going to set that equal to our person's email. And that's just going to be a good way for us to check that we got what we needed. Update views, we'll probably want to call in the view did load as well. It's just kind of like insurance to make sure that things get properly updated. Okay, we didn't really do a guard as view loaded, and I think that will take care of that for us. We should be okay. So now, yeah, another moment of truth. We'll know that we've done everything right if, one, the table view comes up with information like it is here, and then when I click this cell, we should see in the top that email address. And it's not, for whatever reason. Self.title equals self.person.name. So this person name should be, let's figure out why. Self.person, update views.
Do you need a view will appear?
No, we won't need a view will appear because it's only going to pull out once, because like view will appear triggers now, and then the view is dismissed. It's gone for good until you click the cell again. So view will appear. Well, view did load already is going to get triggered again because it's reusing cells. I wonder why the person isn't working though. No atomic person. No, we did send a person over. It should be person does not equal person. I hate when I make a perfect working guided project and then I get to this point and it's not going to work for me.
Did we import the person in the header?
We did.
Okay.
Yep, we did import it there. That is so curious. Because it definitely should have worked. I'm sure it's something dumb that I'm overlooking here. Set person, if person does not equal no, person equals person. Huh.
You want to set a breakpoint and make sure that it's hitting that.
Yeah, let's
inside
do that.
the
Jordan, it's good to hear from you. We haven't heard from you all night.
Jordan's the wizard in the background.
Yeah, it's not even triggering it. So it's probably something wrong with our segue. Show oh. I think it's the, okay. I'm so stupid. Show person segue. It's not show person detail.
Oh, it's the wrong name?
Oh, man.
Oh, man, that's crucial.
Right? How dumb am I?
No, like, it's part of coding.
Oh, man. I'm going to clear this breakpoint out because I know that this is going to work now. There we go.
Yes.
How dumb. Stupid segue identifier. I was so confident that it was right. You guys heard me. I'm like, I already named it this, so you don't have to worry about it. But I was very wrong. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's like the basic flow of what you needed. I mean, you can probably intuitively look through and kind of think about how you would do this going forward. The last thing I want to show you guys, because I do want to end before the hour hits, there's two other things. I want to, one, show you where to hook up outlets if you are still confused on that. And two, I want to show you how you would parse the rest of the JSON, depending on what you need. So as far as outlets go, if we go to the main storyboard, we're only really concerned about the detail outlets, right? That's the only place we need them from. So I'm going to do them in the .m. Can anyone tell me why I would do them in the .m as opposed to the .h?
Most of the time your outlets are going to be private because they're only going to be like on that file, and the file is the only one that's going to use them.
Exactly. I mean, generally, when you guys make outlets, they're only responsive to that specific view, unless you're doing like a delegate and it's working with something else on a different view. Most of your outlets are going to just need to stay where they're at. So we'll keep them in the .m file. It's got this nice interface and end here where we can do it in there. So if you're going to drag actions, they're going to be in your implementation. If you're going to do outlets, they're going to be in your interface. So this here at the top is going to be my email address label. And then this right here is going to be our phone number label. And the last one is our, whoa, please work. Last one's our profile image view. Okay. And let's see. So just to kind of give you a recap if you haven't seen it yet, these are just kind of labels. They're not going to change. It's just going to be placeholders. I've adjusted the priority so that like the text is more important than the email address label. So this will adjust if it needs to. And then we'll just make sure that the title updates with the person's name instead. So that's how you would do outlets. Do you guys have any more questions about dragging outlets or actions or where they need to go? Okay, because you are going to have to do a save button tomorrow, but we did one yesterday in the project. So that should be, you should have code to reference for that. Okay. Last thing, let's talk about parsing the rest of this JSON. So right now we only got an email because the email was the easiest to use. Let's talk about how you would get a name instead. Because if we look here, the name is actually a dictionary with 3 other properties inside. It's got a title and a first and a last. So let me show you guys how we would do that. And it's not hard. It's really, really actually easy. So I'm going to go to the .h of our model, and I'm going to add a property for a name. Okay. And let's actually do it below. I'm going to do it below the email. I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive to prioritize an email over a name, but it is what it is. So we're initializing with an email, and then we're also going to initialize with a name, which is an NS string, do the pointer to reference it, and then the name is the parameter to pass in. So that's just how I updated our init method. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy this to the .m file. So this is still the same. We're just adding another property of someone's name. And then now I can go below email and say underscore name is equal to name. Whoops. I'm going to have built that. And then, yeah, this is going to yell at us because the initializer isn't complete yet. Okay. So if I go down here to our init with dictionary, which is firing in the model controller search method, right? When we get the JSON information, we're going to use this method to turn JSON data into a person. So if I look at it now, return, oh man, it's not auto-populating now. Let's see if this will let me. Okay. Return self init with, oh man, it's not completing, and that's making me so sad. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So we know our email is working, but now let's kind of talk about how you would parse through the information to get the name itself. So, and this is how coding keys work. You guys have done coding keys before, and this is no different from that. In fact, we kept coding keys in Swift because Objective-C was intuitive with it. So what I'm going to do is Insomnia showing me here, when I trigger the name, it gives me these 3 properties. So I'm going to have to configure some sort of internal dictionary to grab things out of. Because if we look here, there's kind of this overarching dictionary, this big dictionary that's looking for an email, and then it can just pull the email out. But now what I want to do is I want to make another level deeper of a dictionary. And this one I'm going to call name dictionary. And so the way that I'm going to trigger this is I'm going to go into our big dictionary and look for the key value called name. We're just going one level deeper with this. We're going from this big dictionary into the smaller dictionary of name. So now hopefully we're living inside here. I'm not super worried about getting the title, but I do want to get a person's first and last name. So I can do NS string first name. And the way that I'm going to get that is just go into our name dictionary now and look for the key value under first. And you know, the reason that I know that it's first is right here. This is the key value, is first. So I've got the first name, hopefully. And now I can do the same thing to get the last name. Whoa, I hate that my autocomplete isn't working right now. Look for the last name. And so all I did here, 24 through 26, I just went one level deeper and then dove into that smaller dictionary to get a first name string and a last name string. And now to turn it into our name, I'm just going to say, just like we did on line 22, I'm going to say NS string name is equal to, do you guys remember that string with format, which is kind of our alternative to string interpolation? Can someone walk me through maybe how I would do that? Give me your best shot.
Something with a % sign.
Yeah. So we'll open it up. We're going to access the NS string class. And then that comes with this string with format. You would see it populate if this wasn't being so dumb. String with format. And then here is where we pass in some sort of string. And then we can give it those placeholder properties of first name and last name. But I've got to give those placeholders a spot. So it's the % at, and then another % at is how we get those to populate. But when we see this run, it's gonna look a little funky, and you'll see it why here in a second. But that's how you would go just one level deeper in the dictionary without having to do it inside the method.
Okay, so this right here is this, and then this one is this one?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. It's saying the same thing as first name and then last name, just like that too.
Now it's going to look a little weird because are they going to be like right next to each other because there's not space?
That's the problem. And that's the other problem with Objective-C is it's not as intuitive on like spacing.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to run it and then we'll talk through how maybe you would fix it at runtime. So let's return self and then we'll init with email. I'm having to type it all by touch, which is dumb, but it's not that bad. Okay, let me build this and see if it goes for us. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go back into our table view, and instead of setting the text label to be a person's email, I'm going to have it be a person's name. And that way we'll get to see how well it's working. Oh, cool. It worked for us. That's weird because earlier today
awesome.
It didn't work.
Oh, you'll need to change it on the detail, the title.
Yeah, we'll have to go ahead and switch the title up here, which is super easy. We'll just do name. And now I should be able to run it and then click through. There we go.
Sweet.
Nice.
There it
What was
is.
the problem you were having with the name earlier?
What'd you say?
What was the problem you were having with the name earlier with the spacing?
It was squishing them together. When I did it this morning, maybe I just didn't, I don't know how I had done it. I was trying to make a space in here like this, and it was being super weird with me. Let's see if this works. That's an extra space. Huh.
Can you do like \T or yeah. But
Like
that's
that?
just like, yeah, I think that would just give you an extra space too. Or never mind. Oh, I think it's the other way, sorry.
Let's see if this does a new line for us. I'm curious if that will work.
Yeah.
Nope.
I guess
The
it doesn't.
slash has to be the other way.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
And I wonder if it's a basic cell. I don't even know if it'll let us do 2 lines. Yeah, it won't let us.
Oh wow. Okay,
That's
so
cool.
that works. That works though.
Yep. Yeah, so that's really neat. I mean, if you wanted to be really crazy, you could split up the person to both have a first name and a last name in here, so you could use them independently. But I mean, having a full name is probably the best way to go. So that's kind of the basics, you guys. We didn't flesh out the email address, the phone number, or the UI image, but all of those we've done before in Swift, and it's pretty much the same if you follow the guidelines that we've done so far. I will zip up the completed project so that you can see it. Does anyone have any more questions about what we've done? How are you guys feeling about Objective-C now?
I still don't like it, but
I'm with you, Casey.
I feel better about it.
Good. Knowing what you know about the sprint challenge tomorrow, do you feel more confident going into it?
Yes.
Definitely.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
That was my goal, guys. Like, I really just wanted to make you guys feel like you weren't going in blind. I wanted to make sure that you knew what was going on. Let me pull it up for you so that you guys can see.
Yeah, knowing like we've done like a search before and like all we have to do is like a save button. Like we're not having to deal with like a whole calculator and doing like 5,000 actions on it. That puts my mind at ease. That way I can focus on like actually getting it done.
Yeah, I agree. So like Hayden showed you guys earlier, this is the detail. You're gonna search. It will come up with, I think there's 3 labels here. It's got the band name, the year they were formed, and then the bio. And then you'll hit save and it will just put them into a table view here. So it's kind of reverse of what we did tonight, but I mean, the only thing that's really different is you're gonna have to make a save method. And we did one yesterday in the project. So here is the API. So what I would do tonight, or at least tomorrow morning, is just read the documentation. So just take this. I'll just link the sprint challenge. I feel like that'll be a little bit more helpful for you guys. That's the sprint challenge tomorrow. So basically all you're gonna need to do is like, this is your base URL right here. And then the end is the search term. So if I go into Insomnia, someone give me a band name.
Weezer.
There we go. So we got all this Weezer information back. This is going to be your base URL tomorrow. So like that's done for you. You just need to do the search bar. And once the search bar hits enter, just trigger this method with the search term. You guys feel pretty good about that?
Totally should have said Taylor Swift for the band name.
Sure.
Let's see. I think it needs to do a plus. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. A space is great. Lowercase is fine. You guys won't have to worry about capitalization. By the way, I'm such a Swiftie. I went to the concert in LA last year. It was so fun.
That's awesome.
Okay.
So we do need the query appending stuff, right? Or
just the search term. So go back to the Star Wars project, and that's it. Like,
right.
The Star Wars project does it pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So your query item is the search term. You're just going to tack the search term onto the end.
Got it.
So I wish we could do a pending path extension, but stupid Objective-C doesn't let you. Tomorrow, don't use unit tests. Don't do a file manager. And if anyone tells you otherwise, tell them to come talk to me. Yeah.
So the instructor is responsible for the requirements, or how does it work?
Well, okay, so if you look up at the README up here, you can see the latest changes. I talked to Ben, and Ben was not very happy that this change was made. So I talked to him about how you guys already have just such a fire hose of a week. It doesn't make sense to have you also do a unit test on top of it. He was like, yeah, that's stupid. Why would we do that? And so he said, don't make the students do that. There you go.
Nice.
So yeah, tonight, go through the API documentation. But I mean, if you have Insomnia, you don't even need to look at the documentation because you know I need, sorry, what did it say? You need the name, the bio, and the year formed. So just go into Insomnia and find those and say, the name is where is the name? STR artist. That's the keyword for it. So like we did tonight, looking for email, that's that. And then the year formed, this is the bio right here. STR description EN. There's your bio. It even has it in a bunch of languages. That's fun. And then let's look for an int somewhere. Hey, oh yeah, we did search Taylor Swift. I was like, whoa, that pulled up Taylor Swift for us. But I searched her. Oh, here's the year formed. 2010. No, that's an album. I wonder, artist name, the year the artist formed. Huh. Let me see. This is the hardest part about JSON, is just having to go through and like look for certain things. Your artist strip. I mean, she has so many albums that it's gonna be a mess. Do you guys see it anywhere? I mean, I can't even find it right now, so I can't even imagine tomorrow trying to have to.
So the formed is referring to the album? Is that what it's
I think the
implying?
formed is referring to the actual artist.
Oh.
Let's try the Weezer one again. See if that pulls it up. Yeah, I mean, it still pulls up the album. That's silly. I do remember it had a year formed though. STR. Maybe it's int year.
You're doing a search album in your base URL.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the sample request. So, I mean,
interesting.
That's the one that you're going to use. AudioDB website. I mean, I'd be okay if you guys picked the year of the album being released. I feel like that. And this API is looking ugly already. Devs, charts. Yeah, no, I don't love this API anyways.
What was the Star Wars project called?
It was called, oh man, let's see here. It was called
stapi.com, I think.
Yes.
Or SW.
Star Wars Search Objective-C. So if you've cloned it, it was called Guided Project, Objective-C Fundamentals, and then Star Wars Search. So anyways, tomorrow, doing your year formed, I'm okay if you guys do the year of the album. Because I mean, that's probably great. In fact, everyone close your eyes. I'm just going to cheat for a second and look at the model object tomorrow. Oh, and this integer, year formed. Int formed year. So use int formed year tomorrow. You can find it in the JSON, I'm sure. My eyes are blind. All right, you guys, how are we feeling? Pretty set?
I'm tired.
Yeah,
I'm gonna let this like sit in my brain for the night.
It's late for you, CC. Better
Yeah.
get some sleep. So yeah, tomorrow morning, check the API, run some insomnia tests. I mean, if you have time tonight and you're feeling up to it, set up your storyboard because you already kind of know what it's going to be. And then I think this sprint challenge will go surprisingly well for you guys. I think you'll have a good time with it, and you'll get done in 3 hours, I bet. So, and if not, then you'll definitely be done in the afternoon. We'll help you get there. So, anyways, you guys are awesome. Let me know if you have any more questions. I'm going to post the recording and the solution, and maybe a bullet list of just like other things that would be good to know, and we'll get you squared away. So thanks for coming tonight, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Good night.